Africa's bid to switch from analog to digital could see further delays. This as several organizations take legal action against Communications and Digital Technologies Minister Khumbudzo Ntshavheni. The concerns raised are that the March deadline could disconnect millions of people who rely on analog transmission for free-to-air content. For more on this, I'm joined now by Newzroom Afrika Director William Bird. William, good evening, and thank you very much for your time joining us tonight here on In Focus. First and foremost, let's talk about why we are here. Why do we need this analog spectrum, and what is it going to do for us? Why is it important that we go to the digital migration?
So, I mean, essentially the way that it's worked previously is that broadcasters have used this rare spectrum in order to broadcast their signals to people on free-to-air access. So that means that all you needed was a set of bunny ear aerials, and you'd be able to receive your television signal. Now, the problem with that is as the technologies have moved along and as things have, and we've switched to digital, we found that actually you don't need to use that particular brand of spectrum in order to use in order to broadcast. You can do it much more effectively if you use digital, and you can use different frequencies, etc., and you can start to get better quality programming. You can have more channels on that programming. You can have things like subtitles, etc., etc. So there are a lot of benefits to moving to digital, and that's certainly the way that the rest of the world is moving. And then what you do is this is called, the digital dividend, is that then that spectrum that's been used by broadcasters has then been used by a lot of the mobile operators, and that's something that the mobile operators in South Africa in particular are desperate to get hold of, because then they can offer more services, they can use more data across it, there'll be better 5G access, they can offer cheaper data, all those sorts of things. So there are a lot of real benefits that we can get from this, and I think everyone is clear that this is where we want to go. No one is arguing in this current court case that we don't want to be migrating, that we don't want this to happen. What the issue is now is that the ministers come out and said, end of March, we're going to switch off analog. Now, the problem with that is that we know from the Broadcast Research Council that there are approximately 36% of our people, if you switch off at the end of the month, they will have access. They will not have access to any television. They rely exclusively on free-to-air in order to receive their television. So you switch off that analog, all of those people are in the dark.
Is there pressure on the minister to switch off the analog, and is that pressure in any way related to the recent spectrum auction that we have seen?
So there is and there isn't, right? And that this has been something that government has been dithering over since for over a decade, right? We've seen lots of efforts to switch it off, and one of the problems we've had is that we've changed our ministers so frequently. We've had so many ministers over the last decade, and getting any kind of flow through and any kind of adherence to the same kind of policy really has been a very difficult thing to achieve. So this minister, to her credit, she said, we need to get this done. She's introduced a level of urgency, and I think we'd all welcome that. Just, get things done, get this stuff sorted out. I think we all support that. Again, the issue isn't that we're seeing urgency or that we don't want this to happen. The issue is that they picked this date seemingly arbitrarily to say, end of this month, we're switching things off. And if you haven't registered, well, then you'll get a new set-top box if you put in the next 3 to 6 months. Now, there's just no way, based on the evidence that we have, that government can possibly meet that target. So they've had, in the last 7 years, they've had 1.2 million people register for this service. And of that 1.2 million, approximately 600,000 have actually got their set-top box installed. So they're still 600,000 behind, let alone, or 800 or whatever the precise figure is, they still got to install those boxes in the next 3 weeks. There's no way that they can do that, let alone then deal with the other millions of people who don't have set-top boxes, who haven't registered.
Yeah. What is part of the delay, in them being able to have distributed all these set-top boxes? I believe that 1 billion rands was set aside to help with the migration from analog to digital TV. Do we have enough set-top boxes? Is the question of the distribution channel. What is the difficulty?
Well, there's some dispute about the figures, and that's part of what this case is about. they're saying that they've got enough to deal with the 1.2 million people who have registered, and that may well be the case. The problem is they don't have enough to deal with the other millions of people who haven't yet registered. Those people that they haven't actually gone out to find out what they're going to do. So those people will be in the dark. The problem there is that what makes that a lot worse is that there's a global chip shortage. I don't know if you've tried, but if you go and look at any shop, it's not like you can walk in and buy the set-top box at any of your local shops, even if you have the money to do so. You'd have to then that means you'd have to then buy a smart television, or you'd have to buy one of these other decoders in order to do that, which is all well and fair and fine for those of us that have jobs and money and all the rest of it. But if you're poor, that is not an option for you to say, okay, we're going to ask you to spend 700 Rand on a set-top box and another 500 Rand on installing the thing. That's 1,200 Rand of money that you just don't have. Or you have to buy a set-top box from MultiChoice or a satellite box from OpenView. Again, those amounts of money are relatively small to middle-class people, but to the poorest of the poor, they're a huge amount of money, and they just can't afford them.
Yeah. So how does not switching off affect ICASA? Do they have to redraft their plans in as far as making spectrum available?
Well, our argument to that is no, they don't. There's nothing saying that we can't and shouldn't be moving the process ahead. What we do need is a properly communicated plan. Here's how you need to do it, that they need to go out into the communities, persuade people why they need to do it. There needs to be a proper public information campaign about this, not to those of us that are on the internet and all of these other lovely things, but to the poorest of the poor. They need to be going into those communities. They need to be doing that, and they need to be making sure that they've actually got the people who can install the set-top boxes, and that they've actually got the set-top boxes. And our argument is that on the evidence available, that doesn't seem to be the case. So firstly, they aren't installing them at anywhere near the rate that they need to. And even if they do, and even if they do install them at that rate, they don't have enough for all the millions of people. So you've got this urgent rush to do this, which is a good idea, except we don't think it's acceptable that you do that and leave the poorest of the poor behind, further making that digital divide even greater.
Yeah. So if government was to listen to what you're bringing to the court and decide that they will rethink their approach to this switching off and digital migration, how would they need to go about it, and what are the time frames and limits that they should be putting in place? I mean, are we talking here another year without digital migration, or is it something that can be resolved, maybe at least if they give themselves another month or two?
Well, I don't think it's going to be a month or two, but they'd need to present actually a plan, and that's part of what we're asking for. We want them to report to the court to tell us what their plan is, how they're going to do this, because, with all due respect, we've seen government on this issue promising we're going to do the switch off here, we're going to switch off then. I think we've had 3 or 4 promised switch off dates, and they've not happened, so people can be forgiven for being slightly cynical of their ability to actually do these things, or their political will to do them. The issue now is that they've put that line in the sand. They said, we're going to be switching this off. If you look at what happened in other countries around the world, when they have had that switch off date, they've only put that switch off date when they've reached at least 95% of their population. Here we're not even close to that. We're 64% or something like that, and they're wanting to just switch it off, and that doesn't seem to be acceptable.
How is this going to transform the digital space, William?
So I think once we actually get this moving, and once you actually have migrated people to digital television, it means more channels. It means you can start to do more things with those. You can get better quality. You can put them in different languages. It means that you can help people with disabilities, etc. So there are a lot of very good benefits to them. If you start to upgrade the boxes that people have, you can start to use them as and offer certain e-services to connect with government, etc. So there are some very real positive benefits there. And of course, the big one is the digital dividend, which I mentioned at the start, which is that spectrum, that critical spectrum, which is what they're having the auctions about now. Those are the things that are really going to be able to make, according to the mobile operators, that should make data a lot cheaper. So, we can expect data prices to fall significantly once this becomes available. And that means, and that's a good thing for everyone, because the cheaper data is, the lower your entry point is to it, the more people can use and access the internet, and that's always a good thing for development. So there are very clear sequential stages and transformations that can happen if and when, as and when we do this. But again, we must make sure that we don't leave the most marginalized and the most needy behind. That just seems to be unacceptable.
Yeah. If indeed, I were to ask you this question right now, is the government ready to switch off? Your answer would be an unequivocal no.
Yep. They've switched off the receivers in 5 provinces for SABC, but not for ETV. So they haven't even done that fully yet in those provinces. And we know that where they have switched off the signal in the Free State, for example, the ETV's viewership went up quite significantly, which again indicates that where it gets switched off, those people that have suddenly no longer got one channel, they then have to go to one of the others. So you are seeing that very real issue there. But aside from that, by government's own admission, they aren't ready to switch it off because they haven't finished rolling out even the set-top boxes for those 1.2 million people that have already registered.
William Bird, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on tonight and bringing clarity then to those challenges.